In the last video, we talked a little bit about setting up an IDE and using it on assignment A5. In this video, what I want to do is introduce the notion of functions in Python. But before I do that, what I would like to do is, if you go over here, you'll notice that there are a couple of tabs here. One of them says project, and that's what we're looking at, okay? And here we have a tab that says structure. It also has the number 7 right next to it. What that means, I believe, if I hit Command 7, let's check it and see if that works. Yep. If I hit or Control 7 or Command 7 on the Mac, it will switch you over to this where I see a variable. See, it went straight to the variable. And if I click on here, it goes straight to another variable. All right. Now, interestingly enough, n is not in the list. So that bothers me a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to actually define n. And in Python, the way that we define a variable is we just simply say n is equal to some value, and I'll set it to some illegal value, okay? So that if we end up with strange input or whatever, it will still get caught by this. So there it is, n is equal to -1, and now as you see, I have n available to me, f is available to me, and v is available to me, and I no longer have any messages or highlights or anything along those lines. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my line numbers because I always like looking at those, okay? So what exactly is a function? Well, a function is an alternative place in which we can run code, if you will, all right? For example, I have here an input, and what the sole job of this particular input is to obtain a non-negative integer from the user, all right? That's what its job is. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a single line of code that would do exactly that? Well, we can make that happen. But in order to make a single line of code do exactly that, we have to create a short little program, if you will, that will represent that single line of code. And that's what we do with functions. So I'm going to type in def, which is Python's method for defining a function, and I'm going to go POSINT in. That's going to be the name of my function, positive integer in. And now I am going to do the parentheses for my function, and you'll notice that PyCharm is giving me a little red squiggly there telling me that life is not good in River City, and is saying that it's expecting the colon. Functions are organized similar to loops. As you see, we did while not done, we did the colon, and then we indented everything that needed to be completed underneath the while loop, underneath the while portion. All of these lines, these lines are in the body of the while loop, need to be completed. And the way that we make that happen, of course, is by indenting everything. And so that's what this is all about. I'll put in the colon so that it knows that we need to indent. I'll hit enter, and now we're going to be playing the wonderful indent game, okay? So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to get a little fancy, and I'm going to grab a hold of all of this like so. I'm going to go Command X to cut that out of there, and then I'm going to go up here and do Command V to paste it in there. Now, of course, it didn't indent all the code like it was supposed to, so I'm going to take care of that. I highlight all of this thing, and by tapping the tab key, it will automatically indent everything into place. So life is great in River City. I'm getting a little message here, variable in functions should be lowercase. This is a Python convention. In Pythonese, a lot of folks will do their variables like this, all right? This is acceptable. I prefer not to because I program in so many other languages, so I'm going to stay with my programming convention of using camel case, all right? So now that I've done define positive int in, I'm going to go ahead and use it. And I'll just grab a hold of this like so. I'll go Control C or Command C, come down here, and I'll do Command V, all right? And I think what I was using was n is going to be equal to, so I'll go n is equal to that. Let's go ahead and run this. Let's run this and see what happens, okay? So we'll pick on that. Enter a positive integer. This is a very good sign. Look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and say 5. I hit enter, and it crashed. It crashed really, really bad. And it says type error, unsupported operand types for none type. What in the world is none type? So basically over here, it highlighted in. We'll highlight this. It expected a number of some kind, but it got nothing instead. So what exactly does that mean? Well, it's taking nothing and adding it to 1. It means that here somehow we got nothing. I really would like to look at this a little closer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set a breakpoint here so that after I obtain n, I will be able to take a peek at it. And I'm going to go into the debugger. I'll click on that. And it says that I'm in the debugger now. Type in the number 5, because that's what I've been using. Hit enter, and it stops, right? At that point. So now I'm going to come down through here, and I'm going to look for n, and look what it says. It says n is nothing. N has not been assigned any kind of value whatsoever, but we say, well, wait a minute. We did all of this stuff up here. I'm sure that it worked just fine. It did what it was supposed to do. Why is this not happening? So let's go ahead and kill this. And what we can do is we can say, put a breakpoint right there in the middle of our loop. And let's go ahead and debug again. Hit the integer 5, like so. And now it does a breakpoint. It says that done is true, and right here it's saying that n is equal to 5. Okay, string is equal to quote 5. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and step through that again, and it takes me back here, and n is none. Okay, rather, where is n? Oh, it hasn't done it yet. So let's go ahead and pop that in there. Now it's saying n is equal to none. Okay, evidently we are not getting n from our little function that we just created back over to here. And at this point in you guys' lives, I'm guessing that you probably don't know why. You might have to look things up, and if you were going to look it up with Google, you would say, Google, my function is not returning any values. And then somebody is probably going to write back that you need to add a return statement. N. Fact is, I'm going to use num, okay, if you don't mind. So I'll come up here and, actually I'll double click this and copy this. Put that there. Put that there. And put that there. Okay, so there. Now, what I've done is I've used a variable that is different than this variable right here to save a little confusion, all right? So now we will go through, we'll do all our wonderful calculations. Number is going to be set to an integer, okay? And eventually it's going to be returned. So how does this work as far as Python is concerned? Well, we ask Python to set n equal to what's here. Python will read this right here because it has parentheses on it. It's going to evaluate, or yeah, it's literally going to evaluate this. In other words, this parentheses, and I hope this isn't confusing, but these parentheses together are actually an operator, all right? And this is my operand. So it's going to go out here, it's going to look for anything that's called post int n, and then because it is a parentheses, open and close parentheses operator, it's going to execute it. Now, some of you guys probably are wrinkling your forehead saying, well, boy, Dave, I don't know about this operator, operand stuff. Well, suffice it to say that if you put the name of the function with parentheses, it will just simply execute that, okay? And we won't worry about it too much beyond that. The key is that hopefully it's going to execute this code. And so it goes through, you know, it leaves this point right here. We're working on this, and it says, aha, I have to execute this. So it's going to go up here, and it's going to start doing all of this kind of stuff. And then finally, when it's done doing all of its cool stuff, it's going to take the result and it's going to return it. And at this point, Python literally replaces this with whatever this became. And that is what's going to be assigned to n. So hopefully this will work, all right? So let's go ahead and we'll stop the debugger, and we'll go ahead and actually turn off the breakpoint, and we will run the program and see if it solves the problem. And sure enough, it solved the problem. All right, let me go ahead and take a break and make sure my audio and everything is working, and then we will come back and tinker around a little bit more with functions. Okay, so it's recording my audio. That's very exciting news for me. So we've created ourselves a function. Now the beauty of this little function is that once we have one of these things that we are satisfied with in terms of its operation, we can then use this in any other program that we wish. We can either just simply copy and paste the code into the new program, or we can place this in an external file, which I'll talk about later, and we can call this from other programs via that external file, or library, if you will. All right? So now that we've done this, let's talk about another function, a very, very important function, and that function is called main. So I'm going to say define function main. In many computer programming languages, main has to be there. Python doesn't care. It's just going to open up the file and start executing it. But a lot of other languages, such as Java, C#, C++, C, those kinds of languages, they all look for a function called main because they see this as the key entry point to a program. Main has a very interesting characteristic, and that is this particular function is going to be stored in computer memory. And if computer memory continues to get consumed more and more and more until there's a point that it starts running out of memory, this particular function cannot be swapped out of memory. Whereas this critter up here, because it's not main, it can be swapped out of memory. All right? So the main can never be swapped out of memory. Now, some of you guys are going, wow, Dave, that's an interesting piece of information, because that would mean that we would want main to be as small as possible. And the answer to that thought is yes, that's absolutely right. We want main to be as small as possible. Now, you'll notice along the side of this IDE that I have these little gray markers. All right, functions should be lowercase, so these are just little suggestions on how we want to name things, and I used camel case to name my function. But down here I have a little red tick, and the red tick is saying that there is an indent expected, and sure enough, I've defined a function main. I did my colon like I'm supposed to, but then I didn't bother to indent anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to indent the whole word. So I highlight it all, and then I tab the indent key, and here I am. Now, if main is supposed to be as small as we possibly can make it, then probably we should create functions for calculating the factorial as well as a function for doing the printing. All right? But before I do that, let's take a minute and just run this and make sure this is going to work. All right? So I clicked run, and it said finish processing with exit code. Try that again. We'll run that. Sure enough, nothing was happening. Well, the reason that nothing is happening is because the moment I defined it as a function, I put it in its own little package. Python requires that I call functions in order to execute them. Remember, here we called the function when we typed in post int in, open paren, close paren, and we set its value to n. We called this function in order to execute it. If we failed to include this line of code, then we would never get any input. Well, since we wrapped all of this code that you see right here into the main function, in order to be able to execute it, then we will have to call it from down here. So I'll do that. Put a remark, launch the program, and I'll just go main. Now, right now, some of you guys are probably thinking, gee, Dave, what's the point? Well, there are some features that we're going to learn about a little bit later on that have to do with this main. We can gracefully launch a program by looking for the presence of main, okay? And we'll talk about that quite a bit later. For right now, though, we're just going to enter main, and what's going to happen is if I run the program, it immediately said enter a positive integer, and I'm going to say 5. And sure enough, 5 factorial is equal to 120. So now what I want to do is create functions for calculating the factorial of n and doing the output. So I'm going to come up here, Now I'm going to define a function. Find factorial. We'll call it find fact. Okay. Now, here, what I'm going to do, okay. I am going to add a little value, okay? And that little value here, or this variable here, is called a parameter. Now that I have the parameter, all I have to do is grab all of this stuff that you see here, okay? And I will cut it out of here, and just like I did before, I will paste it in here, and should be able to make this thing fly, all right? Now, as you recall, we had to return a value. So there's f times equals I, which is what we had to do before. Next step is just simply to return it. Return f, right? So now that that's done, I should be able to come over here, copy this, and under the processing portion, paste it and set it in equal to that. So main is now significantly smaller, right? I have a command here that's going to obtain my input. I have a command here that's going to find the factorial, but you know what? I really need to say f equals find factorial. And here what I will do, I will just say product, P-R-O-D-U-C-T, product, because that's what it's literally doing, right? Command C, product, and here I in range. Come over here, change that to product. And I see a red squiggly, so that's telling me that I forgot to utilize num. You'll also notice that before num was grayed out, which indicated that it wasn't being used. So there we are. Now we should be in pretty good shape, except that it's giving me a red squiggly on F. So let's find out why that's the case, right? And I'll copy product, Control V, and now ostensibly I have a program that will run. So why not run the thing? Positive integer, 5, hit enter, and sure enough, it worked like a champ. So as you can see, sometimes when it comes to developing functions or creating functions, it's a fair idea just to begin by creating it in the main and then cut and paste it outside of the main, all right? So now we finally have our last feature, the last function that we want to create, and that's going to be the output, okay? So I'm going to go def, printresult, print results. And I need to pass in, again, a number, right? So that's what we'll do. Put in my handy dandy quote, come over here, and Command C, Command V, and I see right away that I am missing one of the variables, num, to fix that part. I need to do something about the actual result, right? So I'll go number, comma, answer, ans for answer, and I'll change that to, as you see up here, this is grayed out. I'll change that to ans for answer, and in this case, I don't have to return anything, right? Because I'm only going to be printing the results. So now that I've done that, I can come down here, grab print results, Control C, do my output, Control V. Print results is going to be an N, and over here I'm going to be F for factorial. And as you can see, F is grayed out, but watch what happens when I put F here. The IDE then discovers that F is being used. So let's go ahead and run this. Enter positive integer, 5, hit enter, and there it is. Ran like a champ. So what I've done is I've boiled the main down into its own function, of course, called main, which only has 3 lines of code. One for getting input, one for doing processing, and one for printing the result. So this is one of the really, really cool things about functions, or what is known as modularized programming, all right? And we'll learn a great deal about modules in Chapter 9, but I wanted to give you an introduction to this because some of you guys have already been asking for this, all right? So there you are. We've got that. Now, the last thing that I want to cover very, very quickly is, let's say that I enter characters instead of numbers. If I do that, what's going to happen is my program is going to explode. As you see, I just have all kinds of problems. And the bottom line is I have an invalid literal for int with base 10. In other words, it's saying this is not a number, all right? This isn't working for me. How do you know that that's what it's saying? You can grab a hold of this, highlight it just like this, Control C, and then do a Google search. And out there, you're going to get a message from somewhere. There will be a link that says, hey, you're supposed to be using numbers here and not characters. Well, in truth, there are a host of things that can go wrong with input. When I say please enter a positive integer, and the user types in something else, I just have no idea what that user is actually going to type. So I need to find some way to handle it. And indeed, what I wanted to also do is I would like to change my positive int in function just a little bit. I want it to be able to handle prompts. Okay, so since I'm doing that, I'll just come over here very quickly. I'm going to grab this, Command X, and down here where I use it, I get to supply the prompt. See, this makes my function a little more generic. I can type in whatever I want for a prompt. And then down here, I now am making use of that prompt. So that means that I can do positive int for, n equals positive int. Please enter the first positive integer. And then I can say n2 equals positive int. And here I can say, please enter the second positive integer. And it will work just fine. Fact is, let's just do that. All right. I have, let's run this first so that you can see that it works. Enter a positive integer 5, right? Because it definitely worked. So let's change this, say, please enter the first positive integer, and we will run it. And I'll type in 2 for now, okay? And clearly that worked. Then over here I can say n2 equals, and grab a hold of all of this, Command C, Command V to the second. Please enter the second positive integer. All right, we'll run it. There's that. We'll just say 5 for this. Please enter the second positive integer. Isn't that cool? So by creating a parameter in which I can supply an argument, and that's what these critters are, anything that's inside the parentheses of the caller, because this critter is in fact the caller, that's called an argument. So we take the arguments which get passed into the parameters, which are then utilized by the function. Okay? The arguments are passed into the parameters and then utilized by the function. So, cool. We've got that, and let's get back to what I was talking about earlier. So what about that SDF thing that I did? Well, it turns out that there is a feature of Python and many programming languages that will allow us to catch just an error. Doesn't matter what the error is, it will allow us just to flat out catch the thing. Well, the way that we make that happen is we say, all right, computer, what I really would like you to do is I would like you to try to do this command right here, because it's actually on this command that the error crashes, right? If nstring is equal to SDF, casting it to an integer causes this line of code to crash. So I'll say, try, computer, would you try to do this? Okay. And then I'll indent this. And I'm getting a little squiggly because it's saying that I need an extra line of code. So if I just kind of highlight there, it says except or finally expected. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and backspace this. And I'm going to go EX for except. And what that means is, since this doesn't work, I'm going to try this. But if it doesn't work, if an exception occurs, if it doesn't work, execute whatever code's in here. And that body of code is going to simply be print I quote. Isn't that cool how it finishes up the quotes? I typed in an open parenthesis and it created the closing parenthesis. I type in an open quote and it automatically creates the closing quote, which is very, very cool. All right. I was expecting a positive int. It's hard to type kind of sideways. I've got the keyboard over in La La Land right now. Okay, I was expecting a positive integer. All right, so there we are. Let's see what happens now if I execute this thing. So we do that. I type in the SDF like so. There it is, or whatever. Letters, anything other than the number. Hit enter, and it comes back. I was expecting a positive integer. The integer must be non-negative, and then please enter the first positive integer. Type in 5, and there you are. Okay, and I might even say backslash new line. Let's see if that will do that. All right, give it a little bit. Actually, I will say not new line there. I will do it right here, so it'll look a little cleaner. Backslash new line. There it is. So let's run it and put in junk. Hit enter. I was expecting a positive integer. The integer must be non-negative. Please enter the integer 5, and it works like a champ. So now I have modified my positive int m to handle situations where a person tries to actually input a string instead of an actual number. Okay, so I think that should be enough for now. If you have any questions, email me. With that, I'll say happy coding.